found a white male with multiple stab wounds. We did not locate the murder weapon.
A robbery motive was what it appeared to be at that time.
He was my best friend.
Did he know he was about to die? Did he think about his mother? I'll never know.
Our suspect had a beef with the victim.
We needed the DNA analysis.
But it typically takes about a year to get results back.
My brother's killer was still on the street. They needed to be called before they murder again.
When I saw the palm print, I felt as if I was looking at the murderer's hand.
In our mind, we're thinking, this is our guy, but we had nothing to hold him.
This is going to be our last opportunity to get to the truth.
On June 24th, the Plaestine Police Department received a 911 call from a female caller. She stated that she had just walked into a family member's house and found a white male unconscious on the floor and bleeding from around the neck. The house was in a disarray. It was obvious that there was a large struggle that took place. There was broken furniture. We found the victim laying on the floor, obviously deceased. Multiple stab wounds on the victim's body. There was a large amount of blood. The victim had been stabbed repeatedly, is what it appeared.
There was all the policemen and ambulances everywhere. My aunt came outside and told me the news, but she wasn't sure if it was my dad or my brother. At that moment, I knew it wasn't my dad. His truck wasn't there, so I knew at that moment I had lost my brother. Yeah. It was a bad day.
One of the paramedics recognized the victim as a former classmate, Jared Evans. When you see a young guy meet his end in such a violent fashion, you begin to think of your own family, and you feel for the family members that are about to go through a really tragic moment in their life.
Jared Lee Evans was my firstborn son, born on June 30th, 1978. Jared was a funny child. He was so smart. By the time he was 1 year old, he could talk like he was 5. Everybody thought he was just a genius.
Jared is 3 years and 8 months older than me. He was kind of my idol.
Jared and Barry were closer than any two brothers I've ever known. You'd have thought they were twins.
I wouldn't say he was just my brother. He was my best friend, you know. We hung out every day. He was definitely the best big brother you could ever have. He was really outgoing, outspoken. He was a very good musician. He was an awesome guitarist, singer. The girls were really attracted to him. He had more women than he could shake a stick at. He really did, so he was quite the ladies' man.
Jared was married briefly to his girlfriend since junior high, but they eventually got divorced. Jared always wanted to be a family man. He was that way his whole entire life.
To see the sheer brutality of what happened to Jared Evans, it makes you wonder what kind of person would really do something like this in our small town. I live in this community. My children go to school here. So you have a concern, not just as a police officer, but as a parent. And I have a responsibility, especially to the victim's family, to figure out who did this and to bring the investigation to a conclusion as quick as possible.
When I was processing the victim's body at the crime scene, I discovered that there were 3 blunt force injuries to the back of Evan's head. And it started to form a picture that he could have been attacked from behind. We also could see that the victim had been manipulated. Bloody fingers had grabbed the victim's belt loops, and blood had been deposited in the victim's pocket. And I also noticed that the victim didn't have a wallet. There was obvious evidence that the victim was being rolled over in order to search his pockets. A robbery motive was what it appeared to be at that time. When I entered the kitchen area, I noticed that there was a skillet on the stove with eggs, and the burner was on very low. Jared Evans may have been putting his bowl of eggs in the sink at the time the first blow was struck to the back of the head, which caused him to drop the bowl on the floor.
We were looking for someone that may have seen anybody at the house, or someone that may have been with the victim within the last 24 hours. One of the first names that came up was Stoney Gatewood. I was familiar with Stoney. Stoney had recently got out of prison. He had a lengthy criminal record. The neighbors were saying that there was an issue between Stoney and Jared Evans. One of the witnesses had actually reported that Stoney had run into Jared Evans at a local store and had made a finger motion as if he was shooting a gun at him. While we're still on scene and we're learning all this information about Stoney Gatewood, a white sedan pulls up to the scene. Upon seeing the law enforcement presence, appeared to be trying to get away. Patrol officers stopped the vehicle. It turned out it was actually Stoney Gatewood. Upon questioning him, he stated that he had no idea of Jared being killed, but he actually mentioned that he was with the victim the previous night. He may have been the last person to see the victim alive. At that particular time, we were immediately suspicious that he may have been involved with Jared being killed. We want to turn this person over to Detective Munoz so he could conduct an interview with him. And we transported Stoney to the police department.
During the interview, Stoney Gatewood confirmed that he and the victim had had an altercation sometime prior to Jared's death, and that it was over some money owed to Mr. Gatewood by Jared Evans. Could this have been a robbery that had gone bad? Maybe Stoney didn't intend to kill Jared, but it's possible that this confrontation got out of hand and Stoney killed him and taken the wallet.
We were all excited that we may have actually had the suspect right there. Scanning Stoney's house, we found a knife that appeared to have blood on it.
I lifted him up off of the ground.
Is he telling us the truth?
There could have been another person involved.
I didn't see how anybody could get away with something like that. So I was wondering what is taking so long.
On June 24th, Jared Evans was found deceased in his house on the floor and bleeding from around the neck. He had been stabbed repeatedly. We did not locate the murder weapon or the victim's wallet. There was a struggle that took place.
It was heart-wrenching to know the pain he went through as he fought for his life. It angers me. Bad.
Stoney Gatewood's name immediately came up as a person of interest.
During the interview process, Stoney denied having anything to do with the death of Jared Evans, and he gave us a written statement about his whereabouts, and that was something that we needed to follow up on. But we did learn that at the house where the incident took place on the early morning hours of Saturday, Mr. Gatewood had seen Jared Evans with another man by the name of Jeremy Kennedy. Stoney told us that Mr. Evans was alive and well when he saw him with Jeremy Kennedy.
After the interview, Stoney was released. We needed to corroborate some of the statements that he had made.
In our mind, we're thinking, this is our guy. It's frustrating because we had nothing to hold him, but Stoney is still a person of interest.
Jared and Jeremy were best friends since kindergarten, and they continued to be friends all the way through past their senior year in high school. They were always hunting, fishing. Jeremy was like a part of the family. Jeremy was a very quiet and soft-hearted, kind person. And Jared was the planner. He was a leader. He was just the friend that got everything going.
Jeremy and Jared and Jared's ex-wife, they hung out. I mean, they were all together all the time. They were kind of good friends, you know what I mean? They were pretty good buddies. You know, and all the women liked to come and wanted to party with Jared, and Jeremy wanted to be a part of it too. He kind of rode Jared's coattail, you know what I mean?
We were able to track down Jeremy Kennedy, and I asked him if he would accompany us to the Plaestine Police Department for an interview, and he agreed to do so. This is a fact-gathering mission that we needed to get as much information as possible. You understand that we're investigating the death of Jared Evans? You understand that? He sat there with his arms crossed in front of him. That's a person's way of putting a barrier between you and them. But there was also a possibility Jeremy Kennedy could have been shot. You know, his best friend was killed. What time yesterday you did see Mr. Evans, the deceased?
Around 8 o'clock p.m.
Okay.
Afternoon.
And you saw him at what location?
At his house.
With me in the interview room with Jeremy Kennedy was Ranger Rudy Flores. Really the main purpose of Rudy being in there with his experience and knowledge of working dozens of homicides is to have a second set of eyes and ears in the room.
Interviews conducted early in the investigation like this are information gathering, and it's important to let the individual you're talking to tell their story and get their story out the way they want it to be told.
Then what happened?
I left Jerry's about 3:30.
Well, where'd you go?
To Derek's.
They're offering it as the truth. We pursue it that way, and we look for the evidence in the investigation that'll confirm it, because it's as important to us to eliminate people as it is to establish them.
From that point, where did you go?
It was about 4:30, and I went back to Jared's. When I walked to the front door, I didn't hear him, so I went from the front door through the living room into the dining room. I looked down and I seen him laying there.
What was he doing?
Laying there in blood.
That was a very important statement. He didn't say that he killed Mr. Evans, but what he did tell us is that he could have been the last person to see him alive and the first person to see him dead. Could somebody else have been there in that hour between? It was possible, and that's something that we needed to follow up on. Go ahead and stand up for a minute.
One of the things Detective Moniz and I noticed as we were interviewing Jeremy Kennedy is that he had several small injuries to his body.
You got a bruise here, some scratches here, you got a major cut inside that finger, and you kind of hope taking into account the crime scene itself, a very brutal and violent struggle had taken place. We asked Mr. Kennedy to explain to us how he sustained the injuries that he had.
Some of these scratches are from riding a four-wheeler with my little brother at the deer lease. This right here, I was sitting there putting holes in the can, and my dad just sharpened my knife. And the blade went through the can, and it sliced my finger.
Okay. There was also what appeared to be blood on Jeremy's shorts. It's important that we get him to tell us how did the blood get there, because he did have a cut on his finger. Was it his own blood? And the blood on you, how you got the blood on you?
I lifted him up off of the ground and held him, and I set him back down, and I freaked out.
You didn't call anybody. You didn't call the police. You didn't call an ambulance.
No, I just freaked out and ran out.
Jeremy Kennedy told us the reason he freaked out and the reason he didn't call 911 or call any help for his best friend is that he had been using drugs and he wasn't in his right mind and he didn't react properly. He was afraid to call the police. He panicked.
I lifted him up and shook him. I was just looking at his face. There was no life in him. Nothing.
We want to have you show us how you did that. Is there a problem with that? Okay.
Anytime we have a witness that indicates they have somehow physically engaged in the crime scene, we ask them to demonstrate it, and then we pursue evidence in our investigation and see if it confirms or refutes the interview and the demonstration.
You're on your knees just like that.
And my feet flat up underneath.
Okay.
And
Then?
Yeah, I breathed. I was like, Jerry.
Okay.
And there was no response. I laid him back down. I just
And he grabbed him, he said, and shook him. And that's how he explained the blood that we could see on his shorts.
Now we had to figure out, does Jeremy's story make sense? Does it fit the evidence that we see at the scene? Does it fit the evidence that we see in front of us, meaning the scratches and the blood on his clothes?
One of the rules in bloodstain pattern analysis is all the clothes all the time, and that means victims, suspects, and witnesses. So Jeremy Kennedy put himself in the scene as a witness, and his clothing did have blood on it, so it became necessary for us to take it as evidence, as well as collect samples of Jeremy Kennedy's DNA.
His clothing and blood needed to be tested by the lab for DNA analysis. Mr. Kennedy was released from the interview that day. He was allowed to leave. We did have a discussion, Ranger Flores and I, because Jeremy was at the crime scene. We came to the conclusion that he was still a person of interest, but is this something that somebody would normally do to their best friend? Most likely not, so we had to take that into consideration. We felt that we needed to follow up on all the other information that we had before we could make a decision as to Jeremy Kennedy.
We get a call from Stoney Gatewood's sister, who had called 911 stating that Stoney was flipping out in the house and she needed assistance. It was very important that we respond to the call quickly because Stoney has been the person of interest from day one. I walk inside and I see Stoney in a dark bedroom. He was in a fetal position, curled up, shaking, and acting very bizarre. My first hunch was Stoney was reacting to the crime that he possibly committed. Is Stoney telling us the truth, or did something else happen?
The most trauma for me was thinking what was going through Jared's mind in the last minutes. Did he know he was about to die? Did he think about his mother? I'll never know. I'll never know.
We responded to the 911 call about Stoney Gatewood, a person of interest in the death of Jared Evans. We found Stoney in a fetal position, curled up, shaking, and acting bizarrely. At the time, I had no idea what was going on with Stoney. I didn't know if he was reacting to the interview that he had just been involved in. I didn't know if he was reacting to the news of Jared being killed or if he's the killer. But we learned that Stoney had actually done a substantial amount of methamphetamine. He had to be immediately transported to the emergency room for treatment.
After the completion of the interview with Jeremy Kennedy, I returned to the crime scene and met with Detective Webb and the others. We were able to get the body removed and transported for autopsy. The most important evidence we saw there at the crime scene was going to be the blood evidence. The victim, Jared Evans, was wearing a solid white cotton t-shirt. And we saw numerous dripped bloodstains onto the chest and neck area, mostly circular. They had the size, shape, and appearance of the type of blood that is dripped vertically downward because of the weight of the blood. It gets so heavy it breaks free and it just falls.
Those stains didn't have the characteristics we would expect to see if they had come from the injuries he had sustained around his neck and his face.
Based on the bloodstain evidence, the person who was inflicting the wounds had blood from the victim or blood that he himself was shedding. As he was over the top of the victim, that blood was being dripped off of him and leaving those circular dripped bloodstains. Something else we noticed was that there was blood there that, upon close inspection, had the shape and outline of a pattern like a palm print. Using magnifiers and oblique lighting, we're able to see ridge detail in that palm print on the shirt. And palm prints are as unique in their ability to be identified as fingerprints are. They're unique from person to person. No two have ever been found to match. So this is a very important thing to us. We wanted to make sure that we protected it and made sure that it got submitted to the laboratory for photography and analysis.
When I saw the palm print, I felt as if I was looking at the murderer's hand.
In the interview with Jeremy Kennedy, he had demonstrated how he had handled the body. He grabbed him, he said, and shook him to check on his friend, and then set him back down and left. What Jeremy Kennedy demonstrated was not consistent with it being his palm print. It wasn't oriented the right way, so it would have been from some other person. Or Jeremy's not telling the truth. We need to pursue the evidence.
At this point, Stoney Gatewood was in the hospital. He was being taken care of and treated for the overdose. While we're still on scene, collecting evidence at Stoney's house, scanning the residence, we found a knife that appeared to have blood on it. We immediately began suspecting that maybe that blood is the victim's blood. With a knife with the blood on it, all these things were coming together that Stoney may be our guy. But there's a lot more work to be done to nail it down. We needed to preserve this evidence and get it sent to a lab for testing to see if this was the victim's blood.
We had two things that we really needed answers to. One, whose blood was present in the scene besides Jared Evans? Was it from Stoney Gatewood? Or was it blood from Jeremy Kennedy? Or there could have been another person involved. We needed the DNA analysis. And two, whose palm print was that on the t-shirt Jared Evans was wearing? And those two answers to those two questions were going to guide this investigation.
We knew that the blood would reveal the suspect, but we had to wait. The labs are very overworked, and it typically takes about a year to get results back.
It was so frustrating knowing it could take so long to find out who did this to my child.
I didn't see how something so sloppy anybody could get away with something like that. So I was wondering what is taking so long.
While we wait for the crime lab to finish processing our evidence, we were keeping our eyes on Jeremy and Stoney.
I couldn't believe my brother's killer was still on the street. They needed to be called before they murder again.
When Jared's body was returned, I was adamant that I was going to see it. I didn't care how bad. I was going to see it. I was going to see him one last time. When I went into the room, I had a meltdown. That my beautiful, handsome son looked like that. But I had to see him. I had to see him. He was my little boy. I relive that moment every day.
I just wanted to see his face at least one more time, and I wanted to hug him and tell him I loved him and look at him.
At this point, we have two persons of interest in the case of the death of Jared Evans. We have Jeremy Kennedy. He had blood on his clothing and told us that he was the last person to see Jared Evans alive. We have Stoney Gatewood. He and the victim had an altercation over some money that was possibly owed Mr. Gatewood.
Also, back at Stoney's house, we found a knife that appeared to have blood on it.
We had a wonderful memorial service for Jared. It just meant so much to me when I saw how many people had come to show their love and support. There was so many people there. It's like half the town was there. But then I wondered, why is his best friend Jeremy not here? How could he not come to his best friend's funeral? At that point, I did believe that Jeremy knew who did it, but he was just scared and hiding from the person who did it because they might want to harm him.
As far as Jeremy and Stoney, we were still waiting on DNA results to get back and to see if the DNA analysis will tell us a different story than what these two had told us about what had happened to Jared Evans.
We finally got the DNA results that we'd been waiting for. As it turned out, it was not blood on the knife that was located at Stoney Gatewoods' house. However, what we did find was the blood in Jared Evans' pocket was a mixture of his blood and Jeremy Kennedy's blood. The dripped blood stains on the front of Jared's shirt was a mixture of Jared Evans and Jeremy Kennedy's blood. And the bloody palm prints on Jared's t-shirt was a definitive match to Jeremy Kennedy. Evidence doesn't lie, and the evidence is telling us Jeremy Kennedy is the murderer.
Contact was made with Jeremy Kennedy. We informed him that we had some questions that we needed to ask him in reference to Jared Evans' murder. And he voluntarily came down to the police department.
Hey, Jeremy.
Thanks.
I'm Nick Webb.
Nice to meet you.
We hadn't met. We have enough evidence on Jeremy that I can arrest him at any time. But I don't want to arrest him. I want to get a confession from him.
Getting a confession is critical in this particular case because there was no eyewitnesses to what had happened. And if one person on the jury didn't want to accept the physical evidence, they'd have no choice but to accept his confession in his own words.
Well, tell me a little bit more about how long you and Jared been friends.
We were best friends my whole life.
We wanted Jeremy Kennedy at this point to kind of analyze himself. We're trying to play on his emotional side, the victim being his best friend.
Y'all hung out together a little or a lot?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
And that's just a strategy to pull at his conscience and his morality to see if maybe he would stand up and say, okay, you got me on this, or whether or not he was going to try to hold out.
About this, have you thought of anything else that maybe you might have told us wrong to begin with, or that might help us a little further?
No, I talked to my dad about it, and nothing. I went over it in my mind. I don't know. I have no idea.
At that point, he was going to stick with that story as long as he could. We were in for a long day. We had to figure out a way to break them down and tell us what had truly happened.
I don't know. I have no idea who could have done it.
Okay.
I mean, I thought about it, and I have no idea.
This is going to be our last opportunity to get to the truth. Well, Jeremy, you've had some time to think about this since all of this happened. I know it was kind of a shock to you on the day that you were down here before. Yeah, I kind of got into this thing late. It was determined I would lead the second interview because it would give me the opportunity to ask similar questions to the ones Detective Moon had asked to begin with. After going through it, there's some things that don't make sense to me. I wanted to see if you could help us out. It would give us an opportunity to evaluate whether his responses were the same. Can you run me back through what happened one more time?
When I walked in, there was blood everywhere, and I ran over and grabbed him and tried to shake him. And there was nothing there, and I just ran out.
Yeah. Now, bear with me, I'm not the brightest bulb that is never manufactured. One of the things that I do is I diminished my own intelligence so that he feels that he can beat me. You had been helping Jared paint the house, right? Okay. How much was Jared paying you for painting that house?
He wasn't paying me nothing.
He wasn't paying you anything for helping him paint?
I worked with Jared, shoot, many times.
I mean, as a friend, if you helped me paint a house and I had some money, I'd give you some of my money. I want to get him to admit to pieces of the overall puzzle. He might have done something as simple as just taking Jared's wallet after he found him dead, without having to admit to killing him. Did you get any money from Jared after you found him?
No.
Did you get his wallet from him or anything?
No.
Did not?
No.
Okay. So, you didn't put your hand in his pockets at all then? Okay. You have to challenge their denials in tiny pieces to get to the truth. You had some scratches and cuts and stuff
me and my little brother went to the deer lease.
Is that where you cut your finger?
Well, yeah, it was when I cut my finger.
Okay, but just to make sure I understand, this was after you'd found Jared.
Yeah.
And you went out and you cut your finger. Okay. The story I got from him was the same story that he gave to Detective Munoz on day one. Unfortunately for Jeremy Kennedy, now I had the evidence to prove that it was a story that can't be true. Your blood and his blood is mixed inside the pocket, Jeremy.
It wasn't my blood.
There's 6 pages of DNA results saying that that can't be true. You know what that tells us is that you had a wound with sufficient blood coming out of it to be free-flowing while you were inside the house.
I had no reason to put my hand in that man's pocket, and I didn't put my hand in that man's pocket. I grabbed him around like that.
Yeah, I saw in the video how you grabbed him.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that wasn't the only place your blood was found. There were several other places on his body. You always want to give someone an out that makes them feel better about telling the truth. Here's what I think happened, is that you and Jerry got in some kind of argument, and maybe he jumped on you, you defended yourself, and the fight was on, and you wound up winning.
I didn't fight that man. I didn't do anything to him.
If you don't offer up some kind of explanation that'll fit with the evidence, what's everybody likely to believe? You know, knives get slippery when they get blood all over them. They slide around in your hand. Make you cut your finger. Jeremy, there's your friend. Your best friend in the world. When he saw that photo, he averted his eyes. He looked at it closely and then averted his eyes.
It was pretty obvious that Jeremy was truly affected by what he saw. And I guess at some point he had tried to push this out of his mind.
With over 50 stab wounds in him. This is what I hope will send him over the edge, to get him to respond a little more, and I get that first admission out of him. Blood's in that pocket. That's yours. That's your blood dripping on his chest.
From where?
From the cut on your finger?
I didn't cut my finger till about 9 o'clock or so that morning. I did not do that.
Detective Webb is starting to get under his skin. He's losing control of himself. He doesn't know what to do.
And how did you get there?
I don't know, but I did not do that.
I don't know. At that moment, I started to see the first bit of emotion. And it was frustration and surprise. He had not prepared how to respond to that. Now, if it's easier for you to say you don't know than it is to admit what you do know, then I can't change that.
Well, I don't know. I didn't do it.
Jeremy was still in denial. So we had pre-planned a strategy in case that happened. We had already prepared an arrest warrant for capital murder, and the state district judge signed it. But what I do know is that the judge doesn't believe your story either.
Okay.
As you can see, this warrant is for capital murder. It's a capital felony, and the bond is set at $1 million. Now, it's
warrant's not served yet. We hadn't left this room.
I wanted him to know that he could control his destiny.
There's still a couple other ways out. There's still self-defense. And there's still accidental. But I didn't do it. It don't work anymore. You just need to decide if you want to speak for the facts or you want the facts to speak for you.
Can I smoke a cigarette?
When he asked for a cigarette, it seemed like he was feeling a huge amount of frustration. He wanted to tell, but he didn't want to tell me. He just wanted me out of the room.
I'll go try to find you a cigarette.
I think that was the perfect opportunity for me to remove myself from the room and see if anything changed.
Those are the facts.
So at that moment, I walked out the door and sprinted to the video monitor and got there just in time.
Go ahead. I'm listening to you. I'm here to listen to you. That was the final moment. Either he was going to confess right then, or he was never going to confess at all.
Come at me, James.
We had it.
Come at me, James.
Go ahead. I'm listening to you. I'm here to listen to you.
Man, you got in charge of that night, and he come at me with a knife, and I just pushed him off. And when I pushed him like that, that's when he sliced my finger.
Jeremy used self-defense as an out. Once he made that admission, I want to go back in the room and continue to get his version of what happened and let Jeremy know that we had evidence that it didn't happen like he said. It was not self-defense.
This is what happened.
Okay.
A while back, his ex-wife, when they were going out and everything, I would kiss her too, and he never knew about it. Well, it was eating me up, so I told him. And we had an argument, a heated argument. And finally it died down, it was like, oh, we're friends, blah, blah, blah. Well, that night, it kept on eating him up and eating him up and eating him up. Well, I was bent down to get something to drink out of the icebox. And I heard, hey, and I turned around and he was coming with me with a knife. And I pushed him like that, and that's when my finger got cut. And we just brawling, and I got the knife and I swung and I stabbed him.
We finally got him to admit that he stabbed his best friend, Jared Evans.
Based on the evidence, Jared Evans was initially hit from behind. There was blunt force trauma to the back of the head. We needed Jeremy to explain to us, how is that an act of self-defense? It'd be hard for him to have a knife in his hand right then.
Why?
Because he had a bowl in his hand, standing near the sink.
No, he didn't.
A bowl of eggs.
No, I didn't.
Then why did he have lacerations in the top of his head where he was hit with a blunt object?
You got me.
You think you might have picked up one of those chair backs and hit him in the head with it?
Not that I can remember.
Oh, there's another thing. Your cut to your finger can't happen while he's trying to stab you.
In the beginning, he said he had cut his finger sometime after he had found Jared Evans dead. And now he says that the cut happened while he was defending himself.
He was coming at me and I pushed him, and when I did, his hand just come, you know what I mean?
His hand came down.
Yeah.
But we know that that cut on Jeremy's finger came from stabbing of Jared Evans.
It can't happen like that.
Yeah, it was right here.
Yeah, but there was two cuts.
I know.
So it had to happen twice.
No.
Where the knife got bloody and slipped in his hand, and it caused cuts to himself.
But you also told us that your hand was never in his pocket.
But what happened to his wallet?
No, I took his wallet. His wallet was hanging out, and I just reached and grabbed it.
So you got his wallet out of his pocket?
All I remember is just like grabbing the wallet, and I ran.
Okay. Based on the evidence, what I believe happened is that they had an altercation over either Jared's ex-wife or some money. Jared turned his back on Jeremy. Jeremy struck him in the back of the head with a chair, expecting him to go down, and he didn't. And as Jared turned to face him, Jeremy began picking up the closest thing to him and stabbed him. And he stabbed him from the kitchen into the dining room, where he got him down on the ground and stabbed him until he stopped moving, and then held him down until he quit breathing. That's what I believe happened.
Yeah.
Well, you understand we're going to have to go ahead and take you over to the county, okay?
We all have worked hard and very diligent on this case, and there is a great sense of accomplishment knowing there was no going back for Jeremy.
We had now everything you could have to prove our case. Not only DNA evidence, but palm prints, and now a confession.
When I found out that Jeremy had confessed, I was in disbelief. I treated him like my child, and he took my child from me. It was devastating.
To have Jeremy do something like that, that's about as far a betrayal as you can get. When you sleep in my bed next to me when we're little kids, you know, like a brother, and then you turn around and do something like that to me. And I didn't understand how he could have done that.
I think it was rage that drove Jeremy to do that, because Jeremy was always jealous of Jared. He was jealous of all the girlfriends that he had. He would want that girlfriend. I could see that jealousy in him at times. And I think that all that rage finally came out, and he killed Jared.
Murder trials are tough on the family, and in this case, the family did not want to have a trial. So we negotiated to have a plea bargain, and Jeremy Kennedy accepted and offered to plead guilty to murder.
The plea that the district attorney and the family agreed to was 50 years. Jeremy Kennedy will spend the majority of his life in the penitentiary for taking the life of Jared Evans.
It really does suck not having him here. It does. It sucks bad. If he was here, my life would be a lot different. A lot better. I talk to him every day. He watches over me. I know he does.
I miss my son every day. He was my best friend. About 8 months ago, I got the tattoo with the guitar with his name, and he's an angel, and he's my singing angel. So every day when I look at this, it reminds me of my son and how much he meant to me.
For more about criminal confessions, go to oxygen.com.